Okay, I'm going to go ahead and call to order this special meeting of the City of Nashua Planning Board for December 16th, 2021. Matt, can you go ahead and call the roll, please? Yeah.
Absolutely, Mr. Chair. Mayor Donchis, Mike Peterson,
Here.
Scott Leclaire,
Here.
Adam Varley, Maggie Harper,
Here.
David Tenza, Jan Schmidt, Dan Hudson,
Here.
Bob Bollinger, Larry Hirsch,
Here.
and Mark Meehan.
Here.
And we have a quorum.
Okay, great. So I'm going to go a little bit through the agenda here. We don't have any minutes to look at. Communications, maybe you can just.
No communications for this
none
evening.
here. We don't have any reports tonight. So basically, just to kind of summarize what's happening here tonight, this is a public meeting. We're going to be reviewing the referral from the Board of Aldermen on proposed R-21-203, which is the authorizing the purchase of property located at 15 Bartlett Ave. So the Planning Board's role in this is to, whenever the city is entering into any potential consideration of a land purchase, our role is to provide a recommendation to the alderman regarding whether or not we think this is a positive thing or a negative thing, or whether we have any comments. There is no public comment session tonight. This is just a meeting of the board. So what we'll do is we'll hear from some of the folks from the city regarding what the resolution is about. And again, our role is, again, looking at this in terms of land use against the master plan, things like that. And that's all that's in front of us tonight, is that we're not involved in purchase prices or any of that kind of stuff. It's just whether the proposed land is something that fits in with any, the land use desires of the board and of the master plan in particular. So with that, I will go ahead. Somebody want to present the proposed resolution? That would be great.
Hello, I'm Alderman Clee from Ward 3. The purpose of this proposal was, kind of in a nutshell, the explanation of it is that I make this tantamount to the request for the bond. Was kind of like when you're getting pre-approved for a mortgage. That's really what this is how this has started. The reason is that we have to have approval for a bond in order to be able to make a purchase or something of that nature. So that's really what the purpose of the bond is. But the purpose for the purchase is, the best way I can describe it is, this particular piece of property, this parcel, kind of sits in, I refer to it as the armpit of Greeley Park. So for those of you who are familiar with Greeley Park, the section of Greeley Park, and I apologize because I am directionally challenged, it's the side of Greeley Park that has the bathhouse and so on in it. So when you look at Greeley Park, you'll see, I refer to this as, that's the part where the bathhouse is. And over to this, over where my shoulder is somewhat, is basically where the Greeley Park kind of wraps around and goes there. This little piece of parcel literally nestles right into that piece of property. It is surrounded on about 2.5 sides of the park. It is heavily forested. It's 13 acres. Any type of development or something to that nature could affect the park. It could affect the current trees that are there and so on. So that's why I decided that it was really something for the city to look at and consider purchasing and so on. And I really felt that it was in the best interest of the citizens and the city of Nashua to have this land and to protect the park. And it just kind of, in my opinion, it kind of annexes it. It's not like we're taking just a piece of property that's sitting on the edge of it. It literally nestles right into that corner of the property. The way as I said, the Greeley Park goes, it kind of wraps around that little piece of property. And it's on the other side of it is the Manchester side of Greeley Park. So it really is in there. It fits perfectly within that, and it gives good land use. I just see it as that is really what we need to do in order to protect it. Losing that kind of forestry, if it were to be developed. And I'm not going to, not talk about whether it's a good thing or bad thing to develop it. I'm just saying if it were, and to lose that kind of property and so on, once done, you cannot undo it. And this is the time that we need to look at it and consider this. So if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Sure, any questions by the board?
Mr. Chair?
Go ahead, Mr. Meehan.
I was thinking about Greeley Park and just the history of the usage of it. And when there was discussion about bringing a skateboarding park in, right, in the neighborhood. And then there was discussion about bringing in a playground for children with disabilities and that neighborhood, right? So what kind of, do you just see it as just residing there as woods?
The truth is, when I first started looking into purposes of it, a lot of things come to mind as to what it could be used for, et cetera. My goal here is to save the park, not to develop it. Would we bring in not a developer, I'm sorry, but would we bring in someone who would give us some suggestions of use? Probably, because there's a home on that piece of property. So do you take the home, turn it into a museum? Do you take the home and turn it into a community center? Or someone would have to evaluate the home to determine whether or not it's feasible to keep the home. I'm not in the position to make that. I have lots of ideas that go through my head. You talked about the disability park, one of the issues that people had with that, and I believe that even some of the people that are supporting this development were against that kind of a park. But it was because of the having to turn it into a parking lot, and we just didn't want to pave over Greeley Park. So maybe this would be the place for it. I don't know. I'm not here to make that decision. I'm not here to make that determination. I think a lot of things could be done. That's what we call there's that big rock there that says Nashville. It's a historic, not necessarily that piece right there is not historic, because the historic district, as you know, kind of almost goes up there, but not quite. It's a few homes away. But there's so much history in that area. We could turn it into a partial museum and a community center, where all of the things that you see when you come into City Hall that are sitting in those bookcases, so to speak, or the glass cases, we could put those there, because there's a lot of, when you consider that Nashville itself was once its own city. It was completely incorporated for a number of years and so on. So there is history there. So what could you do about it? Yeah, but I could sit here and speculate forever and ever and ever, and whether the city would go with that would really be determined based on a consultant coming in and helping determine what would be there. I can tell you I have all kinds of ideas of what I'd love to see there. But basically, I want to see it stay forested, and I want it to stay as pristine as it is now. And I can tell you that from everything I've gathered, I have not walked on that property. I've walked around that property. The forestry within there is in really good shape, and the previous owner was very meticulous about having people coming in and cleaning up. I think it's actually in better shape than Greeley Park is.
Okay. Other questions by the board? Okay. Ms. Harper, any
Thank you.
questions online there? Just making sure I'm getting to you.
Before I walk away.
If you're,
Thank you for including me, Mr. Chairman, but no, I do not.
okay, great.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot. Okay, so for the board here, basically you've got the resolution in front of you. Welcome any comments by the board if you want to talk about it, or does anybody feel strongly either way with respect to the resolution and recommendation? Go ahead, Mr. Hirsch.
Yeah, I'm probably going to vote for it. I'm a little bit concerned about purchasing something like that without a specific end use in mind, or some sort of, will it be totally incorporated into Greeley Park? Will it be a separate use? It just seems I'm very uncomfortable with that, the lack of specificity on the use. The fact that it's left open.
Yeah, I think whatever they would build, that would come before the planning board. Anyway. Yeah, you can talk. We're in it's a meeting, so you can still come in. Yeah, the city
Yeah, you're
representative.
right. There's
Yeah.
no specificity as to what it definitely would be. The one thing I can tell you is that it will be annexed with Greeley Park, so it still becomes part of the park. The only question that I had was because, as you mentioned about the specificity of Greeley Park where no monies and so on can transact because of the way that the property was donated to the city, I had asked if for some reason, say, a cell tower were put there of some sort, would that create an issue? And I don't mean a cell tower put there. One of the things that I would want to come back with is that little piece of property that's up on Columbia, that's also part of the city property. I'd like to keep that continuity and make it all one big giant piece. And that was my concern about it. So as far as discussion as to what would be, keeping it as is really everything that we've talked about and everything we want to do. It's more of what would you do with the building? That's the biggest question of all, and that's where you need the consultant to come in.
Where is the building situated on the parcel?
I don't know if you can bring that up, but it's more towards the front of the parcel, I think
Yeah,
probably the
it's
1/3.
Near on Bartlett Drive.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
At the end of it.
I mean, this property literally sits at the corner of Bartlett and Wellington. And where that little elongated piece is, that's right about, just looking at it from the side here, it's a little to the left, I believe, of where it juts in there, is where the property is.
Yeah, it's right there.
Yeah. And there's like tennis court, pool, all of that thing. It's more towards the,
Okay.
I guess,
Sure.
why not just purchase the raw land and leave the house? Or why not take a conservation easement over the raw land?
to
Get the value of the house.
to be very honest, the property was not put up for sale in a public way. So that's why when it was, I really don't want to get into the details of it because that's not
That's okay.
so much for this, but the bottom line was, we have to come up with kind of like good faith, that this is what we want to do. We still don't have an agreement with the seller. The seller is still moving forward with what they're doing, but we need to basically get the yay or nay as to whether or not we could even move forward. And this board would advise the Board of Aldermen.
Okay. Mr. Meehan?
So I want to be careful not to go outside the bounds of,
Right, that's why I'm trying to be very careful.
Yeah, I mean, this is land use, that's what
Right.
we are.
Yes.
so, yeah.
but I'm also a numbers guy.
Mhm.
And, we spend a lot of time talking about zoning,
Mhm.
fostering development, restraining development, the master plan that
Yeah.
Matt and his team did, and all of that. So I just ran a couple of numbers thinking about it. So, $2.5 million at 3%, which is usually what a bond would go out at over 30 years, is about $3.5 million total expense.
If you look at the back of the, I don't have it in front of me, and I apologize, they do give the fiscal analysis of it, exactly what the total cost would be of the bond. And offhand, I'm not thinking, but it was not that much money.
I didn't factor in any of their fees or
Right.
anything, so it just struck me that's a lot. Then I did look up the potential, I understand. I'm just thinking about tax revenue, right?
We're looking at probably about $600,000 in annual tax revenue.
676.5.
Yeah.
And over the same period of a bond for 30 years, that's 20.3 million. So if you do those numbers that way, and you think about 30 years, that's $23.8 million of expense. That's subtracting tax income, and
Right.
it's adding on the full cost of the bond. The acre comes out to 1.8 million per acre. Now, as an alderman, we read all the time about how the city's feeling so much pressure because the state is pushing down expenses. As a planning board, we talk all the time about the need to, careful zoning and thinking about of housing,
Right.
that there is a housing shortage at all levels, not just within
Right.
affordable housing, but all levels. So,
I can answer some of those questions. One of the key here is, you're also not factoring what the cost to the city is for fire, school, all of that kind of stuff like that. But putting all that aside, if you look at any of the, a lot of the studies, like the land trust study, I think that was, and again, I didn't bring that with me and I apologize, but one of the things that has come back is for every dollar that we invest into conservation land and so on, about $11 in revenue comes back. And it's because of the increased use of that particular land and that property. Are we going to say that 13 acres is actually going to produce 11 indirect costs? I can't say to that, but we cannot develop just for the sake of development. We have to look at things as to, this is a piece of land that once developed cannot be undeveloped. This is a piece of land that fits perfectly into Greeley Park. And while everything that you said is accurate as far as the loss of tax revenue and so on, we still have all of those other issues of, this is kind of, I don't want to call it a historic piece of property, but it is a piece of property that literally belongs right there. I'm not taking it from the end of Greeley and saying, I'm sorry, by Concord Street and saying, this property needs to be saved because it's abutting it. This literally fits into, it's like a puzzle piece that fits into Greeley Park. It's not sitting at the tip of it, it's just a piece that kind of, and it actually makes that other piece of property up by Columbia and so on, because it connects it and makes it, I think that actually adds to the value of that piece of property. We can say, what does it matter because the city owns it, so there's really no value to it, but in some respects it does, because everything that makes a city better is what makes a city better. If you drive by Greeley any Sunday, you will see that the park is packed. The kids are running around and they're playing in the park and they're picnicking there. They're not all, those cars are not all from New Hampshire. Many of them have Massachusetts plates on them. And I know this because I live on the other side. I live over on Maywood Drive. So I'm not a abutter to the park per se, but I'm there all the time walking my dogs, my 2 greyhounds, and I see it all the time. And sometimes I have to admit there's a little piece of me that resents the fact that we got Massachusetts people using the park, and that means probably maybe New Hampshire people aren't using it, or Nashua people, but it's bringing people in. So that means the little convenience store down at the end is probably getting some sales for it. They're probably stopping and getting gas here in Nashua and so on. So revenue comes in a different form. It may not be directly through taxes or things like that, but anything that's developed and put in there is still going to use resources of the city. So we can't say that, oh, that's $675,000. That's why I said 600,000, was just because there's still going to be some resources. And again, you can't say dollar, you can't say for every house it's $15 cost, because, we know that it gets separated differently. But the key is they will still use resources. There will still be an impact on water usage, or I should say water pressure usage and so on, which is a whole nother subject to discuss. But there will be a major impact if any of that area is developed. And I just keep going back and forth. Once you take down those trees, you can't bring them back. They're gone. And I would just hate to see us lose that piece of the park. And it's not the park. I mean, I'm going to be honest, there are people who are putting up signs saying, don't let people build in the park. They're not building in the park. That is private property. So I want to make that very clear. This is not the park, but it can be, and I think it should be.
Okay. Mr. Hirsch?
I guess it may be inappropriate, given our role, and I don't quite understand how we fit in a sense. It seems that the building is there, the structure is there, and there's only no need for the city to pick up the building. And the land, on the other hand, I see the value in it. So if something could be done to parcel it off, subdivide, whatever, sell it, to mitigate, to bring down your overall cost, I would think from a business, again, I'm looking at it from a numbers point of view as Mark is. I'm saying, hey, you got the trees that are there anyway. They're not going to be impacted if the land is subdivided. And the house is a house. I mean, basically, you start rebuilding something like that for a museum or whatever else, and I have absolutely no idea the condition of the property, but I'm guessing economically it may be a difficult pull.
Yeah, I mean,
And the city could, like I say, resell it maybe, I don't know, resell it with the conservation easements or whatever else on the land, subdivide the land. There are different ways to approach it. I'm not quite sure what fits into the legal situation here.
I mean, our situation, really, our purview is, correct me if I'm wrong, Matt, we are being presented with, there's a piece of property that the city's considering buying. Do we think that this piece of property is consistent with the goals of our master plan? Is it good land use as it is right now? There's no development proposed at all in any of this document that we have here. This is literally buying a piece of land as it is right now. Is that something we think as a board is a good idea for the city to consider. And as far as pricing and stuff like that, that actually isn't any of our purview. I mean, that's why we elect all the Manic folks is to do that. That we're not a fiscal board by any stretch of the imagination. But I think your comments are good because they are being recorded. They are being, sent to the aldermen. There's an alderwoman standing in front of us. So I mean, this is great. You should make those comments because it's part of our referral as part of just talking about it here. So is that accurate?
It's absolutely accurate. I think Mr. Hirsch's, the options that he's laying out are certainly something that the city leaders should consider, particularly relative to a conservation easement being placed on the property should it be acquired. But, Mr. Chair, you're absolutely right. Your role is to contemplate how does this fit in the master plan as either a potential development parcel or perhaps something that should be conserved and protected in perpetuity via the city's acquisition. I think the argument that's being made this evening is that this would functionally be an annexation of the park and would remain wooded. So I think that's factual to say, and therefore I would consider it in that context. It's unlikely that the city would purchase it and then sell it to a developer.
Technically speaking, that would be illegal. The city cannot purchase a piece of property and then turn around and make a profit on it.
Right.
That is absolutely illegal to do.
And
Whether or
so
not they could subdivide it, that's a different subject, but yes.
And so I think that you really have to consider should this be a parcel, what strategic advantage does this give the city should it be acquired long-term? Certainly there's a value to it as a conservation parcel, or does it remain passive recreation that's annexed to the park? That's really what I think you should be thinking about this evening.
Mr. Reed, go
Just
ahead.
to clarify, thank
Sure.
you. We wouldn't be having this meeting if the imminent development of that parcel wasn't happening, right?
I'm not sure that's fair to say. I think it's possible that we would be having this meeting at any time that the city exhibited an interest in purchasing the property.
And
I think we all know clearly, and this is what we really shouldn't be discussing this evening, but I think we need to acknowledge the fact that there is potentially a development that's been proposed for this site. And so I think it's fair to contemplate the idea of developing this parcel and then contrasting that with the idea of protecting it. But as far as the specifics of that development, that's where there's a line that we shouldn't cross.
And if I may add, the truth is, if this had been open to the public from the beginning, the city would have been coming in. So that's a definite. So just putting that out on the table, this is not to stop anything in particular. It's just to make sure that we're protecting the park and to doing that.
Other discussions in the meeting amongst the board?
Mr. Chair?
Go ahead, Ms. Harper.
I just wanted to make a quick statement in that, I kind of echo what Alderwoman Clay has said earlier, and that this does seem to be a very unique opportunity for our city, and that, when we look at potential growth and development throughout the city, that, this piece of property is going to become even more important to our citizens to have a beautiful green space that's public for them to enjoy. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I might echo, just one of my comments would be that, I've been on the board for a lot of years here, almost a decade, maybe more. There's not a lot of opportunities for the city to buy parkland. I really don't. I mean, I can think of maybe one or two, in the past, over the last 10 years, there's just not a lot of places. So in my mind, there isn't, it's not like this site's competing with a lot of other potential parkland areas that we have. We've got pretty limited places to increase. So if our master plan does talk, it is a balance thing because our master plan does talk about we need housing. And our master plan does talk about, but it does also talk about we need to capture green space when we can, when it becomes available. So they're both in there.
Mhm.
So, but I think the way this one's situated, it makes a lot of sense to me. That it's, got park on 2.5 sides of it, kind of. Go ahead, Mr. Peterson.
As the Alderwoman presented, This parcel of land is sort of in an elbow within Greeley Park, so the annexation of it would just be a natural fit to add to the park, and it is a unique opportunity that we would have this basically this preserve of land available to us that we may never have this opportunity again. It may go some other direction, and we won't be able to come back to this question. So I am in favor of annexing this land into Greeley Park for, in perpetuity for the city's use. Thank you.
Anything else? Anybody want to make a motion? So the motions that we do for these is essentially a motion, you can either motion for it that we would put a positive referral to the Board of Aldermen for this resolution. You can say negative, we don't like it. You can say positive with a modification if you want, you know. The modification has to be pretty clear, you know. Usually it's just positive or negative. Anybody want to make a motion?
I would make a motion on a negative, and I don't think that's the committee's, the board's leaning, so I'm going to.
Yeah, you can put out whatever motion you want.
No, I don't want to create something difficult.
Okay. Anybody else want to make, so that's not a motion. Mr. Peterson?
I'd like to make a motion that referral R21-203, authorizing the purchase of property located at 15 Bartlett Avenue, map 57, lot 3, that we give a positive referral to the Board of Aldermen that the city make this purchase.
Okay, so we have a motion for a positive referral on R21-203 by Mr. Peterson. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Harper. Any further discussion by the board? Okay, all those in favor? Aye.
Mr. Chair, can we call the vote on that, just because we
Oh,
have?
yeah, we can do a roll. Yeah, go ahead.
Just quickly. Mike Peterson?
Yeah.
Yes.
Scott Leclaire?
Yes?
Maggie Harper?
Yes.
Dan Hudson?
Yes.
Larry Hirsch?
Yes.
And Mark Meehan.
No.
Okay, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to 1. That motion passes. Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thanks. All right, that is all we have on our agenda for tonight. So we do need a motion to adjourn. Does anybody want to make that?
So
Mr. Meehan? All right, so we have a motion to adjourn by Mr. Meehan. We don't need a second on that. We'll just do a roll on that quick.
Absolutely. Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Leclaire?
Yes.
Ms. Harper?
Yes.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
Mr. Hirsch?
Yes.
And Mr. Meehan.
Yes.
Okay, we are adjourned at 7:28. Thanks, everyone.